So this is, like I said, this is my experience with this antenna. It's something I've always wanted to try or have for a long, long time. Not an expert, but I'll share what I have learned doing the deep dive. And if you have any commentary or even advice for me along the way, please just jump in. That's my new ham radio logo. Artist Kid drew that for me just a few weeks ago. Kind of came out pretty nice. Could be a club logo. I don't know. Talk about that sometime. See if I can advance. So for me, this all came out of a QST article published in 1985. I didn't read it in 85. I read it in like 89 or so. And it's pretty good. I should say it's quite a uplifting article. You'll read this and you'll think you just discovered the antenna to beat all antennas. The way the fellow describes it, but it's still pretty interesting. This is a diagram from that article. The loop, the square loop, you can tell it's quarter wavelength on each side, which makes it a full wavelength for whatever frequency you cut it for. He gives a couple length examples, and he's just feeding it directly with coax, coax to a tuner, tuner to the rig, and just whatever the SWR is, just tune that out with, counter that with whatever reactance is going on there. That's pretty interesting. After reading that, I wanted to build it. That was what, 89, 90, 2000, 2010, 2020. Oh my gosh, 30 years later, I get to build one. I hadn't forgotten about it though. In more recent research and searches, there's a ton of information on this on the internet. This drawing comes up a lot. So I'm not exactly sure who to credit this with. And in the slides, I try to credit everybody with where I stole the pictures and information and stuff, or I borrowed for the presentation. This one shows up a lot and makes the most sense to me. Same thing, quarter wavelength on a side. These measurements are for a 160 meter loop, which is quite the behemoth. This operator's feeding it with balanced feed line to deal with the crazy impedance changes when you change bands, right? So you can see, oh, I'm sorry guys, let me go back one. I must have hit the forward reverse key there. Just so some of the basics in the research I've dug up, you can see the formula, 1005 divided by the megahertz, frequency in megahertz equals the feet in length. There is at least half the articles will say then subtract 5% to account for the velocity factor of insulated wire if you're using insulated wire. That it clearly the other half of the article writers didn't take that into account and we're wondering, why isn't this more like 960 divided by, I think that was it. The ladder line to mitigate the transmission line loss actually makes a lot of sense. From what little I know of ladder line and our studies for the radio licenses, the mismatch can be high, but as long as the wire can handle the crazy voltages and current, the power still gets up to that antenna. And so we're going with that. And most everybody recommends the 4-to-1 balun, which is interesting because the published impedance at resonance, so in this case at 160 meters, is about 100 ohms. But apparently as you jump up in these harmonics, the impedance gets closer to 200 and that 4-to-1 balun comes into its own. So there's the basis of the internet research there. This is interesting. Probably the part I understand the least, but I'm interested in the most is the current flow, the RF current flow in the wire. So I put up, yeah, there's a big picture. Just the typical pictures we see in our study guides and such. Dipole fed with balanced line. At a given moment, the current is sloshing right to left, as in this picture. Then the other half of the wave, it sloshes from left to right. The high current point is at the feed point in the middle. The low current point, high voltage points will be at the end. Dipole. But then this came up in the loop search. It's really interesting. This is a folded dipole. So kind of a loop, but these two elements are really close together and tied together at the ends. And it kind of sets us up, right? So instead of the current going full circle around like I thought it might have done, it doesn't. The two are synchronized. And slosh left and right together. I'm not saying that very well, am I? As opposed to the current flow on the balanced feed line, which is equal but opposite directions, right? Where presumably it cancels itself out, so it doesn't, preventing the feed line from radiating. And then the loop follows this pattern, but is interesting. So if this is the feed point, much like this, currents going right to left, currents going right to left on this other opposite part of the loop, opposite of the feed point. And then these other two quarter wave sections are the adjoining. So it acts very much like two dipoles in phase, doesn't it? Separated by quarter wavelength chunks of wire. It's really interesting to me. And I believe all the great things they say about these horizontal loops probably can be traced back to this this current flow phenomenon, right? Where fading is supposed to be much less pronounced, if there at all, and there's a little bit of gain even at the resonant frequency over a dipole and dBi, just a little bit, I guess, and that type of thing. So I think it traces back to that. We can ask, or I can ask Dave WA7RSO to explain the math behind it sometime, but this is what I'm coming up with on current flows. This is somebody's calculations on gain. I put this up just as reference. These are calculated or speculated gains, right? The advice is to make the loop as close to a circle as possible, right? So as much area inside the loop as you can get. My loop, as you'll see, wound up being a triangle, and so I like this this site, the IN3ECI, the Italian operator, did the calculation on a triangle fed at a corner. We call it AF, corner of angle fed, and comes up with gain at the max elevation, the strongest part of the elevation, right? So at resonance, it's 90 degrees, which is straight up, right? Well, my experience was pretty much like that, but it's probably okay at the lower bands, right? And then as you jump up in the harmonics, the even harmonics of the it's actually showing odd harmonics here as well, the pattern flattens out, right? And you start to get these lobes, and the strongest part of your signal is much lower. It becomes very interesting at that point. But even here, if we're told a dipole in space has a gain, or dipole has a gain over dBi of like 2.15. So even here, you have a very slight gain over a dipole. So they say. All right, here's the Ed experience. This is the one drawing in this whole thing I can take credit for. So please, no comments on the artwork here unless they're good. I wound up with a triangle. I meant to build a square or something bigger, but it was just really difficult getting this thing up that afternoon. So this is what I wound up with. I cut it for 80 meters. So I wound up, my total length is about 267 feet all the way around. Fed it with 450 ohm ladder line into a 4-to-1 voltage balun from LDG, and MFJ tuner into the Kenwood transceiver, 100 watts out. That was my setup. This was for, as it says, Salmon Run last fall. I was up in Ferry County, just northwest of Republic. If anyone's interested, that's where I was at. DN08 for Barry.
Ed, were your three sides equal in length, or did they vary?
No, it's very much like I drew it. This one was the longest, opposite the, I can show you some of the mistakes I learned later in this research, right? So with the triangle, again, you've got current kind of trying to run this way, and the opposite element in sync with it or in phase with it. So I've read it will favor propagation opposite the feed point. So it's you get a little more gain that way. But my legs aren't symmetrical, so that I think that drove it a little bit crazy. And the way I'm sitting on this ridge, the primary mountain I'm next to is right here, absorbing most of the energy. It probably didn't matter too much at the lower bands because a lot of it's going straight up, right, or very high angle. But trying to make it, though that's the beauty of it, is even with all these problems, the current balun is highly recommended over the voltage balun. The lengths, the height wasn't quite the same. It was really high over here, maybe like 70 feet here, maybe 35 feet at that end, on a slope. I mean, there were a couple of big metal objects nearby that I couldn't see from space. I very unanticipated. So despite all that, it worked really well. This is from space. This is where I was. The truck, the orange is supposed to be where I parked my truck. There was no snow, of course, in September, but this is roughly feed point up here in that tree, and just ladder line down to the balun and into the truck. And little red circle was my vertical, my little DX Commander backup antenna. The intention was, it works really well. It's a great ground mounted quarter wave vertical on whatever bands you run elements for. But the intention was kind of switch back and forth and go with the antenna that was best for that band and that signal and that time. And every time I did that, the loop was better. And so before the weekend was out, that's all I was running.
Oh, did they go 9?
No, 7.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, that's all right. Thought I had a question. The answer is 42, if it's a number question. So just sharing some pictures from the Ed adventure. Might be hard to see. That's my truck, the back end of my truck, and the camp and the radio setup and everything else. There's a tree. Ran the 450 ohm ladder line up. Feed point up there. The feed point was a piece of what's the circuit board material? Some sort of fiberglass, isn't it? It was cut out. That might have actually come from Brian's estate. I don't remember.
Okay. Some kind of phenolic.
Is that what it is? Yeah, it was cut and homemade cut for that, and it worked beautifully, I think.
How did you get your wires that high up in the tree? That's impressive.
Oh, the slingshot. I should have put a picture of that in here. Yeah. I've got a daisy, $6 daisy slingshot with a Zebco reel kind of mounted to the bottom. It's not an original concept. I saw it on the YouTube. In this case, it was, I'll whine a little bit. It was a beautiful day, but it was really difficult. This was taken after the air cleared up a little bit on the last day I was there, but it was really hazy from the smoke, and I'm doing all this work with a full respirator on, and just was running low on energy. And the slingshot and fishing line thing, you got to take about 3 shots for every successful launch because the line breaks or whatever. And part of the reason I wound up with 3. And then I kind of lay the wire. Once I get my Dacron lines up in the trees and such, I lay the wire out. It's just one piece of wire at that point. And then where it comes back to the feed point, I solder it to the whole connection on the 450 ladder line. So literally the generator, soldered gun, solder right there in the field, and build the antenna on the fly. And then by myself, so I've got to run to each end. So I'll raise that in 10, 15 feet. Then I'll run over here and raise that one up and that one and back until it's up. And of course it gets caught on stuff. So you got to run over it and catch it. And it looks like, Barry will appreciate this, it looks like you can just walk through this field, but it's literally fallen timber and ankle breaking holes and all kinds of craziness. So it's, oh, here you can see in the background this square green thing. as a big flat metal grounded reflector of some sort. And then there's another one kind of behind this tree, pointing the other direction. The downhill of the ridge is left to right here. And I think we're looking north. We're kind of looking north here. North would be off this way.
Like a cell phone thing, Ed?
I don't think so. I think it's either reflection for radar
Oh,
of aircraft, maybe. I don't know, way out there. I don't know. Or it's been suggested that maybe it's a passive repeater for some sort of IT based Wi-Fi or microwave of some sort.
Ed, what gauge wire were you using?
The antenna is 14.
Wow.
Insulated, super flexible antenna wire from DX Engineering, which sounds like overkill, but you can see all the potential snag hazards in this thing. And I thought the last thing I need is also for the wire to have all that memory and be hauling up loops and knots and that kind of thing. So in that regard, it was worth the investment, I thought. But certainly, I don't think the RF or the antenna or the radio would know if it was just a 500-foot roll of THHN from Home Depot or something. You know, that worked out really well. Oh, there's that other reflector. Almost looks like a drive-in movie theater screen, huh? Only camouflage. There's my DX Commander. What's a great little portable antenna. And this was that Sunday morning that eventually packed up and left. Overnight, the smoke cleared, a little rain came through, and it was freezing cold and clear and amazing to breathe again. Just happy days. All right, back to the antenna.
And that's such a small reflector in that picture too. That's amazing. You know, if it was really a half of a link from point A to point B, then I would guesstimate 5 or 10 times that size would be needed.
Yeah, what is that? What is that? It's just what it looks like. 4 flat sheets bolted together on a metal tower. The whole thing is grounded, like very sufficiently government-sponsored overkill grounded. And I don't know.
What do you think? You worked with those before. Any comments?
It looks military to me. It's probably a radar target that's used as a reference when planes are flying.
I was awfully tempted to use it as an anchor point for my antenna, but I was kind of afraid too. It'd be like the one day a year the men in black come up in their whatever Humvee or something and to check on their stuff. So I left it alone. And then later I was kind of thinking, how much does that impact my setup? A little bit, maybe. I don't know. Probably worrying about nothing, but it's interesting stuff. This is a frequency analysis, antenna analyzer analysis of the antenna. It's cut for 80 meters, right? So you can see I'm in the band, but it's a little too short, isn't it? I really want it to be down here so that the multiple will fall for 40 meters would fall more in the band. So I was a little bit off there. But like I said, I was pretty exhausted by that point. I was happy if it was anywhere that the tuner could tune it, I was going to run with it. On the weekend, 80 meters was amazing up there. I was making contacts all day long. Low noise, just really good. 40 meters wasn't so good. And I wonder if that was maybe because I was a bit off or maybe not. But you can see some of the other bands here's 20 meters kind of fell nicely in there, and that worked really well. And I honestly didn't get up and hear it all. But what's interesting is the documentation online says, yeah, if you have a full wave loop, you'll get the even harmonics, but I got even and odd. I got 80 and 40 and attempt at 60, maybe, I don't know, but there's 30 meters right there. That's workable. There's 17 meters, just miss, as a near miss. 15, also kind of a near miss. Something I can't explain is how that one's high, but that one's at the low end, then it's above. You know what I mean? The calculator multiples aren't lining quite right. And I don't know if that's the effect of the ground, those metal objects, all of it together. I don't know. So many things to experiment with. The red test, the overlay is the vertical, quarter wave vertical. And that tunes up really nicely, of course. So you can see which elements I had in there. I got the 40, got the 30 meter element, the 20 meter element, and the 17. And then you get 15 as a odd harmonic of the 40 meter element. So it works really well, but just as a comparison. And you guys tell me if I'm crazy or not. I think my SWR is a little high here on 80 meters because of the 4-to-1 balun. I think it was much closer to that 100 ohm impedance as advertised. 4-to-1 puts me down to 25 ohms at the radio. This is before the tuner, right? This is just raw out of the other end of the coax end of the balun. And so that would put me off a little bit. But then you go with the multiple, the harmonics of that loop gets you closer to 200 ohms. And sure enough, my SWR is actually quite good for 20 meters and up here as well. So I don't know, interesting stuff. I hope interesting to me. Hope you guys find it interesting too. So these next slides are MMANA plots for a triangle shaped horizontal loop. I didn't draw these. I scabbed them off of Mr. Commander's YouTube video. So try to give him credit here. This is was there a question? This is at resonance. The feed point's at this end. You get a slight gain opposite of the feed point. He's drawing a perfect triangle though, so mine would have been skewed. And so you get a little bit of gain opposite, and it's still pretty high, but not that 90 degrees that was advertised in the Italian calculations. So kind of keeping that in the back of my mind. The triangle thing could be useful if you're setting up for a contest, something like the 7QP where it's us against the world, and could kind of favor to the east and just let that be. Maybe don't need other directions. I don't know. Just if it's enough gain to worry about. Second harmonic in this case for him it was 20 meters because he built a 40 meter plot. But you can see the point is that it starts to flatten out, and also cloverleaf a little bit, still with a little bit of gain opposite the feed point. And double that again. Same thing, you start to get this clock face, right? And it really starts to squash down. So this would be a 4 wavelength loop, if I'm saying that correctly. So you do have some gain opposite, but you get all these interesting lobes. And then 8 wavelength long loop here for 10 meters would be really neat. If 10 meters had an opening on that day or that weekend. Anyway, that's the Ed deep dive. Some more pictures just to kind of show the trees that I'm launching in. That was my feed point tree. I like this picture because all the cloud cover there is actually forest fire smoke. It was otherwise a clear day, so it's kind of a remember that year kind of thing. There's that crazy movie theater thing again. My operating station in the truck. I set up inside the truck so I could take advantage of the cabin filter in there and kind of filter that out a little bit. So it's not a very good picture. You can kind of see got the Surface Pro running the rig and logging program, and the iPad was my second monitor, and radio and stuff on the right. So anyway, that is, and there's my first place certificate for Ferry County. You guys were supposed to ask how many other people submitted scores from Ferry County.
How many other people?
Nobody. I was the first and the last and all the points in between. And I'll take it. Oh yeah. Here's a slide for 2021. So this is the ed plan for right now. I'm going to double the size of the loop. I've got the wire in hand. So it'll be a 160 meter band loop essentially. I'll do my best to open it up. But that's all based on trees and launching abilities and all that. I purchased a 4-to-1 current balun that can handle some power. Haven't tested it yet, but it's in hand. I'm going to try 300 ohm ladder line. I don't know that that will make any difference at all. But if I'm trying stuff, why not try that too? And then, of course, the station will be capable of a little more power. And that'll be pretty nifty. And this is the location, just a few miles from where I was at to the northwest. You can't tell here, but the blue dashed line is the Okanagan Ferry County line. And I'll be within 100 and a little bit of feet from that if this all works out. It's not buried in snow and all the ifs. So I'm hoping to do that for the 7QP thing on the first weekend of May.
So can you claim both counties activated?
Yes, if I recall, I read the rules, and if you're within 500 feet of the county line was already read. I'll validate that before I claim anything though. I think that would be neat. I don't know. It might be confusing too. I don't know. I'd like to try it though. But if not, there's a dozen other spots along this road here and elsewhere to set up. So this is at about 5,000. To the left is the west. That's uphill, so that's going to be a bit blocked. But a good view. Oh, you can't see my thing. Yeah, it's uphill here, downhill this way. I can actually show you real quickly. I've got it up. If I can. There it is. See if I can do this. Yeah, so that's the target. And if you, I don't know how this will translate on Zoom, but looking north. So north is a bit blocked. West is blocked. That's okay. Should still be able to get over the hill with on the low bands, right? But looking northeast to east is pretty decent. And there's enough distance here. There's the ridge I was on last time that I showed you. It was right up here. And that's kind of the Storm King Mountain kind of blocking the route. Republic's right over the other side. So, and that's looking south. So for VHF, that might still be some blocking, but in HF world, I'm thinking my takeoff angles are high enough here. I should be clearing all that and making some contacts anyway.
I like that bald spot at the top of the hill up there. That would be perfect for VHF. And if I can get up.
I believe, yeah, you're absolutely right, Barry. I've been looking at that from every angle. There's even, if you really dig in, there's some tracks on this side. They look like ATV tracks. You don't know till you go. Of course, from space, it looks like you can just drive up any of this stuff. And then you get there and you realize it's not only can it not drive, it's hard to walk up this stuff. But
like you said, some of that is just ankle breaker stuff.
It's ankle breaker stuff. Anyway, that's sort of the ed plan. Not sort of, it's the ed plan. We'll see how that goes.
And you're thinking you're not sure whether there'll be snow or not, Ed?
I am pretty sure there will be a lot of snow left over. I'm just hoping I can get close and maybe being on the east with a little bit of southern exposure. I don't know. I think there'll be a lot of snow, but I could be wrong. I'm not super familiar with that area or what the different seasons look like.
I predict it's going to be clear by then. I've been researching some of the lookout tower webcams, and there's no snow in the valley, and there's only a moderate to slight amount, but kind of like in the picture you saw there on peaks.
I couldn't be happier. I hope that's what it is. I know last field day, which is end of June, I was on the west side of the Cascades, at about that elevation, and I was breaking through snowdrifts to get to a little overlooking ridge, like hitting it hard and trying to blaze a trail through that stuff. That's all right. It'll be what it'll be. If everything works out right, I'd like to go out like the weekend before, scope out the spot or a spot, maybe launch some polycord and strategic trees, measure it out, get a little head start. I was really rushed and tired last time. And it's to get from door to campsite, it was a good 6 hours to get up there. And then the work kind of begins, and just it makes for a long day. But the contest was a ton of fun. It was super quiet electronically, RF wise, as you would expect, and didn't make a ton of contacts, made 150 something contacts, but a lot of that I sat on. They kind of had a calling frequency going on 80 meters. I spent a lot of time hanging out there, just being a resource for people wanting Ferry County. So it wasn't a very aggressive contest thing for me, I guess. But even so, the Loop made contacts with a station or two in Europe and lots of Midwest and East Coast stations who had, I think there was another QSO party or two going on that weekend, and it was really neat. And last page, just a lot of the resources that where I got some of this information and where I'm kind of basing my calculations and stuff off of, assumptions. That's pretty much that. What do you think, you guys? Kind of interesting, a little bit?
Very interesting.
Good
Yeah.
stuff. Good
Yeah.
stuff.
Good.